there's been significant long-term impact, and it's sadly all negative. So let's just break this out. The framework that the Trump administration is saying they have gotten, and it's to be clear, it's not clear they have actually gotten it because the Europeans don't seem to be agreeing with that statement. But let's say the Trump administration got everything they said they got. Everything they said they got, they could have gotten with a phone call 6 months ago, right? Like if we had told the Danes, we want to put more bases in Greenland, we want more mineral rights in Greenland, we want you to, do more to keep the Chinese out of Greenland, whatever that means, they would have said, awesome, we love the idea of you doing that. So like everything they got was on the table just for the asking. The downside is we have now reached a situation where the Prime Minister of Canada, the United States' oldest, best, and most important ally, is saying that the United States is a predator that is taking advantage of other countries and that he needs to make alliances with other countries, including China, judging by his actions, to protect himself from the United States. It's almost impossible to overstate the level of the damage there. If the United States had somehow managed to extract ownership of Greenland from Denmark, that would not have been even close to being worth destroying the trust that the United States has built up with pretty much every other developed country in the world over the course of more than a century. You go ahead.
No. So this trust that the United States has built up, is it the trust that the White House is now putting at risk, or this particular White House, I should say, versus the U.S. government overall? Because in 3 years' time, in 8 years' time, we could have a very different government in charge. And do we go back to the old ways?
Yeah, I think it started with this administration, and if we were just talking about one Trump administration, it would have been just that. And then I think that's exactly what would have happened. We would have reset to the old ways, and everybody would have said, "Look, every country has a hiccup once in a while. These things happen." But now you will hear Europeans say straight up that Trump is a reflection of something deep about what's happening in the United States right now. That it is not just a case that they do not trust the Trump administration. It is they do not trust the American public to not keep electing people like the Trump administration. And that creates a completely different set of constraints and circumstances.
Are you surprised, I guess, going down that thread, Gautam, that we haven't heard really anything from members of Congress over the past week or the last year even?
I wish I could say I was, but I'm not. And I think what's really striking is even members of Congress who said that who are not running for re-election are still unwilling to criticize the president directly, with like a tiny handful of exceptions, but in the Republican Party. So even Thom Tillis, who's like, I'm out, right? Like he said, I am not running for re-election because I want to be able to speak truth to President Trump, is saying, hey, I don't actually have any criticisms of the president. It's all about his advisors. And just be clear, like his advisors are not the people pushing Greenland on this. That appears to be sort of from within the president's own head. And so I'm not surprised, both because there's, his control over the Republican Party is total and people want to get reelected. But more than that, I think people are scared, right? Like if you stand up to the president, if you are seen as his enemy, you are deluged by death threats and, things that are not a normal part of American politics. In some sense, I guess you could say that January 6th worked, because there are quite a few Republicans who are in fear for their lives, not just their seats.
So, Gautam, moving forward with all of this, I'm curious, you mentioned Mark Carney and the speech that he gave declaring there's a new world order here, the old world order has ruptured. How does Europe respond to this moment? Because they seem as disorganized and, frankly, as weak as ever. And, when President Trump pointed them as weak, it's hard to see how they can come to agreement on how to stand up to him.
So I would never underestimate the Europeans' ability to fold under pressure, and but I think first is you did see they started to put troops into Greenland, right? Like that is not a minor signal, right? So there's a lot of we are really starting to push back in that way, in a way that we hadn't seen before, and I think if it had actually come down to an American use of force, that has a clarifying, right? As Oscar Wilde said, the prospect of hanging clarifies the mind, right? That I think would have solidified the Europeans together.